This video is sponsored by Squarespace. First thing I want to show you are all of the buttons on the camera, and then we'll get into the menu settings. This will be a quick, simple startup guide. I'm not gonna get too technical. Let's dive in. All right, so let's start off with the buttons on the back and on the top, just so you can get familiar. Now this is a touch screen, so you can always come here and use your finger, but I find once you get used to your camera, it is nicer just to know what dials and buttons do what. So let's start off with the play button down there. Seems simple enough. You play. You see what it is that you have. Right now, I have it up so I see the histogram. Just tap info, and this is going to toggle the displays that you have here. So let me just go ahead and take a picture of my juggernaut. We'll hit play, and it'll play it back. Now we can tap info, and depending on what you want to see, this is showing us the settings on the bottom. You can see the histogram here, or you can just see it completely clean. I'm gonna give myself a little bit of information. That's where that goes. Now, while you're in the play, right here, you can see there is a magnifying glass button. So while you're in the play mode, you can tap that and it's gonna zoom in and out. You could, of course, because it's touchscreen, just click and drag and tap around, but just depending on where you prefer your hand position to be, you may or may not want to use the button there. If you want to delete a photo, you just tap below and hit erase. From here, we have a few more of the dials. Let's go back into my shutter here. I just half press my shutter button on top, and then we go back into this viewing mode. So some of the buttons down here that are quick taps are, let's go to ISO. Hitting ISO will pop up your ISO options, and on the top you have a dial right there. So when you hit ISO, you can go up and down and choose settings. That way, of course, again, you can touch and drag if you prefer. This is your flash button. This has a pop-up flash, so if you decide to have the flash on and you're in some kind of auto mode, it'll automatically do it, or you can just from the top lift up your pop-up flash, and once that's on, it's gonna know that you want to use it because you've hit this flash fire button. It's telling that we want to fire. Boop. Just like that. On the side here, this left side, this is where you can get to your drive mode very easily. So you can set your timer for 2 seconds or 10 seconds. This is the continuous shooting, the one, the timer with the C. So as you do this, it will continually shoot every 2 seconds, or if you want it to go 3 seconds, you can do that. The dial also controls that. This is if you're taking photos of yourself, you can just set it to take a photo every couple of seconds so that you can get a variety. Or you also have your high speed continuous shooting, so that you shoot low speed, high speed, and then super high speed. You're just taking a lot of photos. This is good for sports and pretty much nothing else. But if you're photographing movement, that's a great way to do it. I have been using Squarespace for over a decade, and you can see it at vanessajoy.com. I decided to use Squarespace so long ago because it was one of the easiest, and still is, one of the easiest ways to make a website out there, hands down. Squarespace is a platform where you can create beautiful custom websites in just a few minutes. Choose from a plethora of templates where you can easily plug and play your own work. It's an all-in-one platform for building your brand and growing your business online. We all know that an online presence is crucial for your brand, so build one that stands out. Head over to this link for my exclusive 10% discount on your first domain at Squarespace. Now back to the video. Now, just to show you the top of the camera, just so you can see some of the other buttons that you have, obviously you're on off. This shutter button up here, that's how you take the picture. You hold it halfway down to focus. This is your video record button, and then this is your dial of modes. You can go to this R10 is more of a beginner camera, so it's doing a really good job just going in auto. That's full auto, meaning if it thinks it needs the flash, it'll pop up the flash. And then you've got a bunch of other modes. I'm not here to teach you about the modes. I'm here to teach you about the camera and the settings. So we can get to that in another video. And the nice thing is when you change your modes, it has a menu that walks through. You can just tap that arrow down and it's gonna explain the mode that you popped into. It's just a nice walkthrough menu. So if you're not familiar with any of these, you go into aperture priority and it's gonna tell you what aperture priority does. So it's just a nice feature, especially if this is a new camera for you. Okay, now my favorite button on the display here is this Q button up top. You can also get to that Q button by tapping the middle here, but the Q button is gonna have all the basic functionality that you'll likely want to get through. So let me just go through this entire thing, starting with the top left. This is your autofocus settings. Now, automatically, it's gonna have that eye head face detection, but you might wanna go to 1-point autofocus, or this one is spot autofocus. I tend to like spot autofocus, so we're gonna leave that. All right, so you can also go through by tapping, and then this up here, this one moves around, and you can move around your menu that way again if you don't want to tap. So there we go, autofocus area. Now with servo, personally, I like to be in servo because when I am focusing, if my subject moves and I am holding halfway down, see here, it's like locked onto my juggernaut's eyes. My subject moves, it's going to track it. Or even if I move. So if I move around, it's still locking that focus on the eyes. So that's what servo does, is it tracks that focus for you. So I like to keep that on. This is where you set your image quality. Large JPEG is great for if you don't want to do much editing or any editing at all. If you do know how to do some editing, maybe Lightroom, Photoshop, then you could shoot on RAW, which would be there. You would tap that. You can shoot RAW plus JPEG onto one card, and you can also shoot compact RAW, which is a smaller RAW file. Down here, these are your movie recording sizes. So again, you've got that movie recording button at the top. So this is where you would set what kind of movie recording that you would want. Depending on what you're using your video for, you may want to go for some 4K action or full HD. Normally, I set mine to 4K 23.98. The next one down, this is our metering mode, and I like to put this to spot metering. And the reason I like it on spot metering is that if I'm on a program mode, let's just say aperture priority here, and it's determining the value for me. Right now I have this EV, which is my exposure evaluation, and it's up right now, so I'm just gonna put it down to 0. So, okay, this is the auto setting that you decided, but I would like my picture to be a little bit darker or a little bit brighter, and you could tap on it like I did, or you can use this dial on the top. The spot metering helps the exposure come from where your focus is. So if I'm photographing a person, that means the exposure is coming from their skin tone, which is what I prefer. Versus if I was on a different metering mode, let's just say evaluative metering, that one is going to take the whole scene into consideration. Now I'm in a scene where it's lit really well, so this is not a good example really of that, but that's a good place to be. Anyway, while we're here, I do want to talk about your shutter speed and all of your other options here. So this is one of the auto modes, and auto modes, you know, can vary whether you want to prioritize your shutter or your aperture or just go full auto and let the camera do it for you. But no matter which of those modes you are in, you have this EV dial here, and that's where you're telling the camera, okay, you said that the exposure should be that, but you know what? My personal style, I like a lighter photo. So then you're gonna go up, and you can make it really bright if you want to, or you can go the other way. You know what? I prefer a darker photo, and you can dial it down. For this one, because it's aperture priority, it's holding true the aperture that I set, which is at f2, and instead it's going to change when I say go brighter, lowering the shutter speed you can see there, and then in some of the auto modes, it'll mess with the ISO as well. I hope you're enjoying this video, and I have something absolutely free for you. If you head down to the links below, you'll see a lot of educational content, but you will also see a download for a free preset. This is a Lightroom preset that I use very frequently for my same-day edits and my photos, and I call it green to yellow. You can grab that in the link below. Now back to the video. Okay, back to here. This is your image ratio. You know, maybe you want to take a square photo, you can set it to that, or one that has a 16:9 ratio, like you're doing a thumbnail for YouTube. For me personally, I'm leaving it 3:2. And now on the top, I'm gonna put my anti-flicker on. That's just helpful in case you're in an environment where the lights are flickering. Now, the white balance is a little bit subjective, but personally, this is where I set mine to AWBW. So what this is your white balance, and you could go normal white balance, but I like going white balance with white priority. Again, we're in a very clean lighting situation, so you don't really see it right now, but that white priority will help you have your whites white instead of maybe a little bit more creamy or yellow looking, depending on the environment that you're in. So that's where I like to live. Again, you can do some of these presets here, like if you're in daylight, you can see how the shade makes it a little bit warmer. You can also go to this K button right here, hit set color temperature, And this one, you're dialing it in manually. So you see how blue he looks right there? As I raise the number there, now that's about correct. And then as I go even higher, it gets warmer and warmer. Something that's a little bit more advanced, takes a little bit more time to get used to and to dial in. Even as a professional photographer, my jobs, my weddings, I'm on auto white balance with white priority because it just does a darn good job at figuring that out for me, and it's something I don't have to think about. Next, we have picture style. This one I usually keep on standard. You can hit info and you can adjust these things. It's basically determining the contrast, the sharpness, the color tone. I do like keeping it right there on standard, or if I'm photographing portraits, the portrait mode is nice. Now this picture style is not to be confused with the creative styles or creative filters that they have. This is a little bit more on the heavy editing side, and it'll affect your JPEG, not your RAW if you're photographing RAW. So something like grainy black and white or soft focus. I should be using my dial here. Fisheye effect, art bold effect, which actually, oh, I like how my little juggernaut looks in that art bold effect. He looks so good. But that's something, you know, it's fun to play with, but also keep in mind that, you know, maybe you want to routinely make yourself turn it off so you're not stuck photographing, I don't know, something that isn't supposed to be all grainy black and white. you're forgetting. Now here's where you put your subject to detect. If you're photographing pets, you can switch it to animals. If you're photographing vehicles, or you can just turn it off. And when you turn it off, it's not detecting a subject. Instead, it's just wherever you put your focus point, that's where it's gonna go. I'm gonna put it on people, and let's start talking about focus point. So your focus point here, you can tap where you want it to be and where you want it to focus. Now personally, I have a setting in the menu that I'm gonna change in a moment to show you how I do things, but I tend to like to tap, or you can use this joystick right here, and this will move around your focus point. So you can move that around, hold halfway, and you can recompose if you want to or need to, and then take the photo. Another option, let's just say my focus point was there, would be to put your focus point on your subject's eye, and it's going to detect their eye, lock focus, I'm pressing halfway down that shutter, and then I recompose and take the photo. Couple different ways to do it. It really just depends on how you like to do that. But now let's get into setting our exposure, which we see on the bottom here, ISO, aperture, and shutter. You can do this with your dials. So the dial that's right up here above your shutter, this one is going to control out of the box. You can always change these dials to really control whatever you want, but out of the box, this is going to change your shutter speed. Then you have this dial up top. This one is going to change your aperture. And then in order to change your ISO, you're gonna tap the ISO button, and the dial up by your pointer finger is going to control that. Again, any of these you can just tap and change. Tap back if you want to, if that's easier for you. But sometimes if your eye is up to this viewfinder, it's just easier to use your thumbs as opposed to backing the camera away from your face and tapping to change things. Let's hit this menu button right here. This menu button is going to get us into some of the other functions. This is a quick guide, so I'm just going to show you how I set these things personally, and I'm going to skip over the things that I don't think are really relevant for just starting off with this camera and getting things set so that you're happy with the photos that you're taking. A lot of this we did go over in the Q menu, but you can also access it here, like image quality. We're shooting on JPEG, how I have everything here. Again, you can tap or you can use your dials. This is another way to get to your exposure compensation. All of these things I'm really just leaving as it is. So you can screenshot this, you know, pause it and set yours to the same, but this is pretty much how it comes out of camera. Now this clarity one down here, this is something I will mess with, and it's not in the Q menu. If I'm photographing a person, I tend to go down 1 or 2 clarity points, and that's just going to smooth out their skin. I mean, really the whole photograph, but just going to smooth out their skin, versus if I'm photographing a still life, maybe a landscape, I might want to go up in my clarity to add a little bit more punch, a little bit more almost texture, really. This only affects your JPEGs. If you're shooting RAW, it won't affect your RAWs. All right, let's keep going down. Touch shutter, it is disabled right now. Some people like to have it enabled. So what this is I have it enabled. I just tap and it focuses and takes the photo. I don't like to have that because I want to be able to click and drag my focus point around, which we're going to get to next. But I just wanted to show you where that was. And now into the autofocus. Now this I'd like to play with a little bit. So we've already determined in our Q menu that we're using servo, not one shot, so that the focus track. We're using the autofocus area. That's a 1-point focus there. We've already said that we want to have people be the priority subject, and then eye detection, you want that enabled. We're gonna move on past here a couple couple more until we get to this touch and drag autofocus settings. Now, personally, I like touch and drag. So I'm gonna go here and I'm going to enable it. And then the active touch area, I like on the right. So what this does, if we're here, we've got the viewfinder, you know, up to our eye, the electronic viewfinder up to our eye, we can, with our thumb, drag around the focus, and you'll see it while you're looking through here. You'll see your focus point dragging around. I have long fingers, so that's pretty easy for me to do while I'm holding on the shutter button and grabbing right here to pull my focus around. So that's just an option that I like to have. You might not like it, so feel free to turn that off. That's definitely a personal choice. Everything else in here, I really don't change, with the exception of this blue, number 5, this highlight alert. I like to enable that. What this does is when I take a photo, let's make this one overexposed, and there are parts of it, I'll play it back, and there are parts of it that are totally blown out, it's going to blink on me. It's the blinkies, as my friend Dennis Reggie says. I like to have this because I shoot a lot of weddings, and if my wedding dress looks like that and it's totally blown out, like I'm in trouble. I'm not showing the detail on that dress. So I like to have that enabled as like a warning, just an extra, hey, that's not the way it should look. You're getting 0 detail in there, and that helps me out. So blue menu 5, highlight alert, I like to enable that. If you are not using Wi-Fi and actively using it to connect to your camera, I highly suggest that you hit disable, but you can enable it. It just sucks your battery a whole bunch, so you want to be able to save your battery. All right, these are all some of the more fine-tuned things and custom settings towards the end. So all of this stuff we're gonna just leave as is, but I did want to get to, oh, here we go. Copyright information. You can actually put your name in here so that your name is attached to the photos. So your copyright information is there. That's not something that I particularly do. So, you know, up to you. And the other thing I wanted to show you, format card. So this is if you want to erase everything on your card. Be careful. It is good to format cards the first time you put them into the camera. And you know, if you have downloaded all the photos off of your card, it's really good to format the card every time you put it into the camera. People ask me this a lot, the screen brightness. I like to keep it right in the middle, right at 4. That's just my personal preference. I feel like that's good. If you want to clean your sensor, that's where it is, under yellow 4, sensor cleaning, and it will auto clean when it turns off, or you could clean now, and it'll go through like you'll hear it clean. Oh, actually, there we go. Hear it like opening and closing the shutter, and it's cleaning it. A lot of people like to clean it while it's facing down so that any dust kind of falls off the sensor. I think that's it. This is pretty much it. As far as a quick setup, again, there are so many other tools that you can use, but if you are just setting up this camera, those are all the buttons. Those are all the things that I think you should be concerned about to get your camera set up for success. I hope this has been helpful for you in setting up and using your Canon EOS R10. Let me know in the comments, and of course, save this video for later because you're not gonna memorize everything all at once. You'll probably end up coming back to it time and time again. Let me know if there's anything that I missed that you want to know about, and I'll see you next time.